Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. It's Fran here, and I'm back with a new video, which is going to be my Game Week 10 team selection. Just because I didn't actually cover my Game Week 9 review, it was a simple game week where I scored 90 points, nothing special, simply because the midfield didn't live up to expectations. The 50-50, in my head at least, between Saka and Foden didn't necessarily work out. Foden, of course, had a spectacular game. And I think one of the key things, too, is specifically because of Grealish's position within the City team. Once Grealish actually starts alongside Foden, that does give Foden the opportunity to actually make more inside runs, whereas Grealish is, of course, someone who drags the ball a little bit out wide and then cuts it off to lay on to someone who's looking to, let's say, take a shot from the outside of the box, so on and so forth. Whereas Foden is almost the last man at times, and you could see that in that specific Man United game. That's something that's changed from the season because I think, especially with Grealish's form getting better and him being able to nail that left wing position, it has enhanced Foden's in recent memory. In the past, what we saw actually was that someone like Saka and Foden were actually occupying similar positions, because when Foden plays the Grealish position, I don't think he gets as many touches or even shot creating opportunities in the box himself. So that has been the main change, and I think, of course, very happy for anyone who went for Foden. As far as Zaha, he didn't necessarily live up to expectations either, but of course it was the toughest matchup, and I did decide to go Zaha specifically on the wild card, so I didn't really have to waste the transfer on him. The main thing, of course, is that the kind of spear that I thought would have been Saka hasn't really worked out, and in reality, Saka is still playing extremely out wide. I was very lucky to get the kind of haul that I did in the Brentford game when he got 2 assists. They were pretty much passing to people who were taking great outside the box shots or even a corner kick, which he actually doesn't get as a frequent opportunity because of Odegaard coming back into the team. As far as the defense, once again, it failed. You could actually see players like Cancelo and James do extremely well in Europe. James versus AC Milan, Cancelo versus FC Copenhagen. But at the end of the day, I'm still very happy with these picks. I still think that going forwards, because of the sea of green fixtures, including the blank for Cancelo and also James in particular, these are both assets that I expect to come good. The question, of course, is, do I keep triple Newcastle defense? And I think I still do, because there are no defenders that I immediately need for my team. If I do need a defender, it's really for the next week where they play United, and that's going to be the big question mark. But then also keeping triple Newcastle defense could be quite fruitful for Game Week 12. Ultimately, though, when we look at the forwards, I think Mitrovic, of course, is going to be the big question mark of this week, and the overarching theme behind some of my decisions in Game Week 10 are going to be what to do with Mitrovic. We haven't actually had the press conference yet in terms of a confirmation of whether Mitrovic is fit and ready to play, but I'm going to take the assumption that he is probably ready to start, but could get re-injured. I think one of the issues that I'm seeing from Mitrovic is that he has been carrying this injury for around 3 games. And with a player like Mitrovic, I think he's always ready to play football, and I think footballers are always the ones who can put themselves in harm. We've seen many times where managers are happy to play players who might think that they're ready to play, and unless there's protocols in place to actually stop a player to make sure that they actually rehabilitate from their injury adequately, I think sometimes you actually see an injury worsen over time. And I'm going to take a kind of precautionary move with Mitrovic and suggest that I will move away from him. The main reason as well is because I have players like Nico Williams in my team who aren't dependable. So I have less depth, I would say, than most players in the game. And I'm not too high on Andreas right now. So whilst other people have players like Guehi or even Dunk who could be quite serviceable in the meantime, or even someone like Zuma, I just don't really back my defense right now. And I think I would actually like to make a move away from Mitrovic for the time being. But of course, different strokes for different folks, and you can also save a move, roll a transfer to go for Mitrovic, or to keep Mitrovic, sorry, in your team. For me, I'm actually going to take the assumption that his injury situation could actually just get worse regardless of whether he gets to start this week, and I'm taking that bet for my team. Moving on to the bench of my Game Week 10 team selection is exactly the same as last week's, and you'll see that it's Iverson, Shaw, Andreas, and Nico Williams. No real change because I think Newcastle still have a very good defensive fixture. Yes, of course, Fulham actually suffered a red card, so it was quite easy for Newcastle to keep their clean sheet. For specific players like Trippier and Shark were subbed off before they actually lost the clean sheet. So someone like Pope, for example, suffered in that sense, but Shar didn't. For that same reason, I think I'm still going to play Shar at my bench because I'm specifically looking to replace Mitrovic, and that's going to be the key, I think, theme from this team selection. My personal feelings is that my team is still set up pretty much for the future, heading towards even Game Week 13, because I now am only in a phase, especially since I plan to move away from Saka, to actually retain only 3 City and Arsenal players combined. So therefore, I don't think I need to really force a transfer or save a transfer for Game Week 11. It's specifically 12, which I'd like to have a double transfer for, and I could roll on 11. So it really just depends on what happens if there's any specific injuries, which will force me to make a transfer in 11. But I would like to also attack this game week because I do think Saka has a bad game week, so it's worth moving away from him. And Mitrovic's ceiling is somewhat capped because I have, first of all, a weak bench, and second of all, a player who could just get re-injured or actually just play very few minutes in this specific game week. Now, moving on to my team for this week, the defenders are exactly the same as it is. There is an opportunity to move away from Pope, and of course, when you're looking at the triple Newcastle defense, it's a bit of a problem because arguably a third Newcastle attacker could be a little bit more valuable than going for a triple Newcastle defense. I think obviously it has been a mistake so far, but the wild card, when you play it, you do plan it for multiple weeks, and I do think there's an opportunity to play triple Newcastle defense once again in 12. We'll see whether I actually follow up with that, because I actually have made transfers this week, which will allow me to move away from someone like Ashar in the future. The alternative too is to move away from Pope. Ward is an interesting transfer because when Pope actually plays Man United, I would expect for him to lose a clean sheet, and then that Tottenham game in the near future is another opportunity for them to lose a clean sheet. So for me, I would actually say that Pope to Ward is a very interesting transfer for those who want to make it in Game Week 11. And I might be forced to do it if I really feel like Newcastle aren't going to keep a clean sheet versus United, and if the rest of my team doesn't have any issues. As far as my defense for now, I think Trippier is just fantastic. We've talked about how he's a double-edged sword. No changes there. Same with Cancelo, unless, of course, Pep decides to do a 45-minute substitution versus Southampton. And with James, fantastic game versus Milan. Not necessarily the case where they actually conceded quite early versus Crystal Palace, but I don't really think that was his fault. He actually put on a great defensive effort versus Zaha, and we know exactly what James can do on the offensive end. 1 goal, 1 assist versus Milan. Hopefully he can reproduce something similar versus a Wolves team that still is actually in search of a new permanent manager. Moving into the midfield, I have Trossard, Zaha, Martinelli, and Maddison. And Trossard is, of course, this transfer away from Saka. Why move away from Saka and why move into Trossard versus Tottenham, which is arguably a tough game as well? First of all, I actually think this Brighton team is playing very attacking, and I think what we've seen so far from the historical trend of De Zerbi as a manager is that he is a very positive attacking manager. So he will look to actually create and build chances, and that's exactly what we saw versus Liverpool. We've seen Liverpool collapse multiple times this season, but I wouldn't say that opponents have actually been able to actually create as many effective chances as Brighton did in that specific game. Brighton's expected goals were actually higher than Liverpool, which is something that actually hasn't happened much this season, contrary to your beliefs potentially. Liverpool have actually done quite well when it comes to net XG, but they actually were trampled over by Brighton in the first half specifically, and Trossard just looked fantastic. I think he is, with Welbeck, the two most interesting assets from Brighton attacking pieces. Gross for me is not so interesting. We'll see, of course, whether he actually picks up some form within the games. He was actually an early substitution. Meanwhile, Trossard actually got to play 90 minutes. And I think with the change of manager, you're probably going to stick to your guns to people who start to deliver good early. And I think Trossard is someone who, on a 3-game week window, heading towards game week 12, is going to be really interesting for me. And the reason why I've moved away from Saka specifically is because, as I said, Saka's playing extremely out wide. The corner opportunities are now taken away from Odegaard, or taken up by Odegaard once again. So that actually takes, once again, his chances away from assisting. And his only chance of assisting really is exactly what Ben White did to Partey in that Tottenham match, where, of course, you just lay it off to someone in the midfield who's looking to actually create a finesse shot in the top right corner of the box. And without Fabio Vieira playing, that doesn't happen too often. It's only really Partey who's going to take that right-footed shot because Odegaard and Granit Xhaka left-footed. So that also closes off Saka's opportunities to actually create an assist there. The alternative, of course, is that he makes that inside run and he actually finds his way through the defenders and sometimes dribbles through. But I don't think Saka's actually created that many opportunities this season. I was hoping that in some of the easier fixtures and some of the more attacking fixtures where, let's say, if Tottenham were to play a little bit more attacking, Brentford as well, who have been very attacking so far, and potentially even the Liverpool game, that he'd be able to find a way to actually counter and be effective there. But I'm still thinking that he does play extremely out wide. I do think Martinelli and Jesus are the better assets when it comes to open play, and therefore I've chosen to move into someone like Trossard, who's playing like an attacking 10 from that left inside forward position, and someone who I really, really rate as a player, because this season we've seen him take much more shots on target. So it is going to be a transformative season for him, and especially I think with the transformative manager when it comes to the attacking sense. And I'm not really, going to care about whether Brighton actually keep a clean sheet or not. It's just about their attack. I think this Tottenham team, of course, have been very, very defensive so far. But the key fixture for Trossard is game week 12. That coverage of the Nottingham Forest fixture, I think, is fantastic. I think arguably Trossard could be seen as a one-stop transfer in game week 12 for someone like a Martinelli, but I don't really think I want to lose the transfer value in Martinelli. I do think it actually will have a long-term effect on my season, and I just can't really evaluate going for someone like Foden in the short term, especially when he has a blank. So it makes sense for me to go into someone like Trossard. And especially with the Liverpool team actually showing a little bit more defensive muster in that Champions League game versus Rangers, who are, of course, a much weaker opponent. But that tactical formation, I think, does provide a little bit more defensive stability. Some people have talked about Trent and his worsening returns in that structure where he's going to play a little bit deeper. But I do just like how I mean, defenders simply just get points from clean sheets, right? And what our usual expectation is with Liverpool is that they can get those clean sheets at least 45% or 40% of the time. I do think they could get that with that new formation. And Trent is still going to find great opportunities as a set piece taker, just like someone like Trippier, who's been fantastic so far. So my plan really is to actually open up an avenue to go into Trent, or actually simply change my team up, because with TROSSARD, I do have more money saved in the bank, and of course I'm going to talk about my MITROVIC transfer as well. But those are moves that I would say leave me flexible on game weeks 12 and 13 to actually adequately plan for what I want my formation to be like heading towards the World Cup. As far as Zaha, Martinelli, Maddison, they all have fantastic fixtures, with exception to Martinelli, who plays versus Liverpool. But I still think this Liverpool team have been mostly weak on that left-hand flank anyways, or at least defending, sorry, the left-hand flank of the opposing team. That right-hand side, especially with Trent, with some of the lapses of concentration there, have been very effective for some players, exactly like Trossard in the previous week. So I'm keeping Martinelli. I'm kind of keeping specifically for team value, and I'm very happy to own him in my team. He's probably going to be actually someone who has a little bit of a lower ceiling this week, but happy to keep throughout because I plan on keeping at least Triple City and Arsenal combined. Zaha and Maddison just have great fixtures. It is a mirror matchup very, very soon for them. But we'll see what happens. I still think that both teams can actually be quite open when it comes to these weaker fixtures. We've seen Crystal Palace, of course, be a defensive unit at times, but I think they've also shown a propensity to actually concede in the second half of stage in games. And I think this Leicester team have shown to be very, very attacking regardless. And if you look at, let's say, the expected goals of the Nottingham Forest and Leicester game, that was a key opportunity to show how easy it is actually for opposing teams, even weaker opposing teams, to actually break through this Leicester team. I don't think their defense is very good, even though they kept a clean sheet. So quite happy to actually own them during that fixture. Maddison really only has a bad fixture in the very, very far future, which is when he plays versus City. If we finally move into the forwards, I actually am planning to move away from Mitrovic into Dominic Solanke. Why Dominic Solanke? That actually frees up a lot of funds in my team and actually frees up 3.1 million in the bank. And the reason why I've gone for Solanke is two reasons. Because I wanted to free up funds exactly for what I wanted to talk about, which is an opportunity to move into Trent, or at least the option to do that in Game Week 12 with one transfer from Shar to Trent. Especially if I don't back, let's say, the triple Newcastle defense, even versus Everton. That's an opportunity there. Another opportunity, of course, is to change the structure of my team to potentially move into a sort of hybrid formation where I have 5 midfielders instead, because especially with the midfielders opening up, there is an opportunity to move into that too. And I also think that there's an opportunity to move into someone like an Aubameyang in the future away from Kane, or even open up an opportunity where I go Jesus and Sterling if I actually think that that's a better move for my team going forwards. I think with Mitrovic, as I've already explained with the injury situation, I think someone playing on an injury for 2 to 3 games in a row isn't necessarily going to recover immediately. I think it could turn into a long-term injury situation, and I think a lot of managers potentially would still bench Mitrovic because there's a fear he might not even start the game. But I think my move is set right now on Solanke, especially if Mitrovic is not going to be fit. But I also have a doubt in my mind, even if, let's say, Marco Silva is actually tempted to, or actually suggests that Mitrovic would start, I still think that there's going to be that thought in the back of my mind that he is someone who's playing on an injury, and it could reoccur. With Haaland and Kane, there's nothing new there. I think Kane is someone that I expect to keep in my team at least until 12. We'll see whether I actually make that move to Salah, which I think, of course, is going to be recommended by a lot of people. But I don't really see the opportunity to move into Salah now. The one thing that makes me interested about Salah is because of how poor, or actually how interesting, someone like a Foden or a Bernardo Silva have been. So going triple City actually seems quite simple without having to actually spend the funds to move into De Bruyne. So therefore, I still actually have an excess of funds in my team to actually play around with. So maybe I do actually force that move into someone like a Salah. But the opportunity there is to also go into someone like Sterling, who I think has been exceptional so far. Even though he's not necessarily gotten the hauls that we expect, I think Sterling is someone who is effectively a dark horse, because I do see this Chelsea team being much more attacking, and I think they have the fixtures to prove it, really. Haaland is, of course, the captain this week. I don't think there's much to say about this man. He's probably going to be our set and forget captain for the very, very near future, with exception to Game Week 12. But we'll let Game Week 12 come upon us before we actually make a decision on, taking that captaincy off of Haaland. But anyways, that's my team selection this week. Thank you guys so much for watching the video, and I'll see you guys soon.